Ladies and gentlemen, the Mouthcast.
I bought a toothbrush, some toothpaste, a flannel for my face, pajamas, a hairbrush, new shoes and a case. I said to my reflection, let's get out of this place. Past the church and the steeple, the laundry on the hill, the billboards and the buildings, memories of it still keep calling and calling. But forget it all, I know I will. Tempted by the fruit of another, tempted but the truth is discovered. What's been going on now that you have gone? There's no other.
It's early January and you're listening to the first edition of the Mouthcast from 2014. Though we're actually here on a cold December day in a rather quaint town by the waterside just south of the Humber Bridge. My guest on this edition is in town as one of the last few dates on what's been quite an extensive solo tour. There is also one half of a much-loved songwriting partnership which stretches back 40 years. And in 2008 was presented with an Ivor Novello Award for Outstanding Contribution to British Music. Glenn Tilbrook, welcome to the Mouthcast.
It's very nice to be here, thank you.
On your tour bus.
Yes.
As a prolific songwriter and half of the Squeeze songwriting partnership, I've often wondered whether you've looked back at the track listings of, say, one of the greatest hits albums which are periodically put out and thought, well, they were the big hits, but greatest songs?
Sometimes yes and sometimes no, you know. Bearing in mind that the compilations almost never have anything to do with us anymore. Some of them are complete dartboard selections as far as I'm concerned. What did generally tend to happen, though, I think, in let's call it the second half of Squeeze's career, is that most of my favourite songs were not the singles that were deemed fit for the marketplace. And we got A&R'd increasingly the less success we had. So the singles, in a way, mostly for me, lost touch with where our songwriting was really heading, you know, as far as us growing as writers was concerned. The earlier ones, the singles, you know, they stand up very well for me, I think.
The songs that were big for Squeeze, Label with Love, Cool for Cats, Up the Junction, which you've played in session for us, why do you think those tracks in particular hit big, and songs like Tempted and Pulling Muscles are arguably more well-crafted songs, shall we say? Why do you think they perhaps didn't?
Well, you know, you have to go back to essentially what the BBC would and wouldn't playlist. You know, it was a curious business then as it is now. You know, the place I played at last night, I noticed that Shiwaddy Waddy were playing in January, and they had something like 15 top 5 hits, and you have to think that's you know, it's no disrespect to Shiwaddy Waddy. Of course I'm about to say something disrespectful about them, but they were a cabaret show band, you know, and why would they get support when a record like Tempted wasn't even played? You know, it was a mystery to me then, as much as it is now. Having said that, the only time I ever consider it is when someone like you asks me about it. I sit around at night thinking, if only Shiwaddy Waddy hadn't been there.
Well, the songs, obviously 30 years plus, the songs develop their own lives, if you like, over time. And like you say, you've got very little to do with putting out the compilations and stuff. So in a way, I guess you must have to let go of songs. Inevitably, some will have got left behind. Yeah. So there must have been songs around to which you were more attached than the singles, say. You
know, I mean, I think the thing is that we've done since this version of Squeeze got back together in 2007 is that we've become custodians of our own back catalogue as far as live is concerned, and I think we've been much more fastidious in the way that we approach it. I think we got a bit sloppy last time around when we were together, and we got a bit too comfortable and took it all for granted, and that's very easy to do because it happens so slowly that you morph from a real band into a not quite a real band.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that you stop paying attention to what you're doing properly, you know, and particularly live. We just got a bit lazy. We had people coming in and out of the band, and, you know, it's very hard to maintain spirit in those circumstances unless you work really hard at it all the time, and that's what we didn't do. We worked hard at the writing, we worked hard at making the records, but live we were just too comfy. So this time around, I'm absolutely determined to not let that happen again. And each time we approach playing live, we rehearse fully and extensively and make sure that we put the time in order to get the best out of it. You know, we had, for instance, on the last tour that we did, we had the best reviews we've ever had as a band. And I was pleased with that because it meant that the work does pay off. It does. People notice.
Mm. Were you ever looking to have hits after those sort of early singles hit? Was that ever a consideration in the writing? I ask because yourself and Chris, the names kind of fit together so well, like Lieber, Stoller, Lennon, McCartney.
Yeah.
You know, like the songwriting factory thing. Were you ever, I don't mean in a negative sense, but churning them out?
No,
like
I don't think we were churning them out, but the last 4 Squeeze albums all happened under, you know, we were with A&M and we were dropped, and then we were with Warner's and we were dropped. We were back with A&M and dropped by A&M America, but kept on by A&M here. And then, the last record that we released was our first independent one. And in those circumstances, when you're with a major label, it's a business, and was becoming more and more so in the 90s, let alone where it is now. You know, it's a horrible business, and I don't feel any part of it, really, because their job is to sell records. And I remember there was a track that we had called Loving You Tonight that they paid a Kiss DJ to remix, 20 grand of our money. And he did you could tell he'd done the remix or got an engineer to do it for him, because it was the least thought of, least considered, least craft-like, makes us sound stupid and we pay for it. You know, so, you know, like it ticked all the wrong boxes. And so they were desperately trying to create a hit for us. And it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen, and it's not going to happen unless it's under our own steam, because the closest that Squeeze was to a proper band was when we were left alone at the beginning. You know, we had 5 albums without being A&R'd, and they were probably amongst Squeeze's best work, you know.
In fact, as a songwriting partnership before Squeeze, you and Chris shared a house or a flat together in London.
Yeah.
Chris would be downstairs writing lyrics and passing them upstairs to you, where you'd be working out the music.
Yeah.
The partnership's ongoing, obviously. Do you share the same space to write these days, or do you sort of...
No, I mean, even then we didn't, and really, we never have. Very rarely. We've tried it a couple of times. But really we work best to exchange ideas once we've had the ideas, you know. And so it's like kicking a ball backwards and forwards rather than actually doing it together. And that's the way we work best.
Does that make it almost like you have to bolt an idea onto somebody else's idea? Or is there territory? Is it like a Venn diagram? Is it basically, I'm asking, is there a middle ground where Chris can say to you, I don't like those chords, or you can say, can you change that line?
Yeah, I think there is, but the dynamics of our relationship, you know, we've yet to work out properly this time, because we've written, since we've been back together, we've written maybe 6 songs, which is not prolific at all.
Is that just down to the fact that you haven't spent a lot of time doing it, or has it been difficult?
It's been really difficult to establish our ground properly again, you know, and there's the added thing of in the intervening gap, I've started writing lyrics, and so I now cannot unquestionably accept Chris's lyrics all the time, you know. I have more of an opinion now than I used to, and finding a way to make that work is interesting. When we have done it, it's been brilliant. Not that anyone's heard it except on the last tour, but we've written at least 2 songs that I think are absolutely up there with our best out of those 6. But next year, I think, is when we really need to establish how our writing works now.
So beautiful, funny, and slightly apart. A hint of the bonkers was there from the start. I live my life from day to day. With her I thought maybe things could change. She took the time and learned to live with the fullest commitment I could give. My engine was revving as I let off the brakes, and I gave my heart to my fruitcake. The buns in the oven.
As you say, you're writing your own lyrics for your solo records. So that must be an entirely different thing, like a new ground for you almost, is it? Or have you always written lyrics and just not
I
used
haven't.
them?
No, it was a horrible shock to my system when we split up in '98 or something. I hadn't written a lyric since I was 15, so I was 40 or something when I started again, and it was hard.
There must have been a lot to say, though. 25 years worth of...
I found the subjects I found reasonably quickly, but the way to satisfy myself lyrically was quite difficult. It took a lot of attempts before I wrote anything that I thought was good. And of course, in my mind, there's the ghost of Chris looking over my shoulder going, that's rubbish. That's rubbish.
I was going to ask.
I'll still have that now.
I was going to ask if you've ever worked on a set of lyrics and thought, oh, what would Chris say here? Or I better not say that in that way because that's what Chris would do.
He's my biggest influence lyrically. And the worst criticism I can make of myself is that sometimes my lyrics can sound like Chris's lyrics in a way that he doesn't write anymore. And sometimes that's good. Other times, with some stuff, I think, I just shouldn't do that. I'm not consciously doing it. It just, I'm closer to my working class roots. Not that I wear that as a badge of honour. I just am. Than Chris is, and those subjects still interest me. I'm not sure how much they interest Chris anymore. So that's probably what I mean in saying all that. But, there's a lot of stuff that I can write, and I am able to discern now how different my writing style is to Chris's. I'm a lot more analytical. He's a lot more overview perspective in his lyrics. And when we've worked together on a lyric, those two combinations could be really good.
I wondered, I'm sure this is a question that could easily also be asked of Chris Astley, if your solo stuff is in some way a reaction to the partnership.
But I think that one feeds the other always, and every time, it's like when Squeeze got back together, I wanted to bring in on drums and keyboards two of the people who were in my three-piece band, the Fluffers. And I said to Chris and to John Bentley, who were, of course, both original Squeeze members, look, the reason I want to do this is because in the Fluffers, I found the energy that Squeeze didn't have for a long time and that we used to have. And I think we can have that again if we concentrate and try. And that really has proved to be true. From the start, the Fluffers and my solo world did inform Squeeze, but then I took how compact original Squeeze songs were when I went back to them in a way that I hadn't for a long time. I took that back to my solo one with the Fluffers when I did Pandemonium Ensues. I'd just come off of working with Squeeze and thought, right, okay, how come my songs have ended up all being 4 minutes plus when they used to be 2-3 minutes? And what is that extra minute giving anyone? Not a lot, mostly. Since that point, I've been very, very keen to trim down everything and to make everything as concise as possible. And I think that's been a really great thing I've learned sort of from myself, from my early incarnations.
What you just said about the members of the Fluffers, you wanting them to be part of the new Squeeze to get that vitality back, if you like.
Yeah.
That must be really hard for a band like Squeeze who've got such a long history to keep hold of that. So when it did go pear-shaped for you, if you like, if that's not too unkind a way to put it.
No, it's exactly what happened.
How disheartening was it for you?
We'd ended up in such a weird and horrible place that it couldn't be anything other than, first of all, Chris said, I don't want to do this anymore. Fair enough. He hadn't really put his heart into the last album anyway. I was very gung-ho with being independent, and he was much more attached to the fact of Advance album producer, so we fundamentally differed in our approaches there. But from that point onwards, the whole thing about having the Fluffers is that we went back to grassroots, and I was really the only one out of myself and Chris flying the flag for Squeeze and myself. We did tours where we were sleeping on people's floors and all that stuff, which I'm not romanticising it, but we wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it enough where I wouldn't be paid, and I'd pay the band and all that stuff, and they're not in it for the romance, but they go through that with me. So when you have those experiences together, you get a bond that doesn't break easily. And that's why I think having that with those people, as well as the other guys in Squeeze, is why this band works so well together. And now we've got it all together,
nasty business that never enhanced us. The sort of truth they'd have us believe. Coke sniffing vicars and kiss and tell chances, digging the dirt for us to receive. The cops came knocking right at tat tat tat. Well, we're sure it's nothing but some phones were hacked. A rogue reporter went beyond the pale, but he acted alone and he was sent to jail.
Well, your new solo record, Happy Endings, which is out January.
Yeah.
I've been listening to it this week, and it's really interesting that there's no drums on there. So it's intimate and live sounding. Was that a conscious decision not to make a band recording?
Yes, because that's always been the way that I've worked until now. And I started listening to some old records that I hadn't listened to for a long time, namely Tyrannosaurus Rex, an incredible string band, and a band called TNR, which are all late 60s, early 70s hippie folk records. And I love the sound, the real simplicity of guitar and bongos or percussion, harmonium or something really stripped down like that. So that was my template for what my record was going to be. Of course, it ballooned and turned into something else, but I kept to having acoustic instruments. Some of the more elaborate arrangements came late on in the record.
I guess, as you say, it ballooned into something else from your original idea, but that would perhaps be down to the fact that you have your own studio, so you'd have the luxury of being able to keep refining what you were doing.
Yes.
Do you ever think anything's lost in the translation up to a full studio production? Have there been records in your career, for instance, where the finished product is a 7 out of 10 instead of the 10 out of 10 that it was in the rehearsal room?
Yeah, that happens. Making records is one thing where you do actually carry on getting better at it if your enthusiasm is there. And so one thing you can't always be sure of is you'll get the definitive version of the song. This happened to Squeeze with, the last album we made, first time around, Sweets from a Stranger, had Black Coffee in Bed, and for me it's an appalling version of the song, but I didn't think so at the time. I just know it now. So I don't think that happens so much now. I think I have the time and the luxury to consider whether it's right or not, and if it's not right, I can always do it again.
For records, some of the Squeeze singles, say, like the really well-known stuff, it's been very difficult to imagine it any other way, in a sense. Yeah,
that's true, except, I said we were left alone for the first 5 albums. I take that back. One instance was Up the Junction was exactly the same record as it is now, but it didn't have the lead line, the tune, at the beginning and the end, and the sort of keyboard and guitar overdubs that were quite tuneful in the song weren't there because the original intention was for it to be like Bob Dylan and the band. So it was just like Positively 4th Street or something as I saw it. But the record company said, it needs something else, and thank goodness they did.
Well, the songs on Happy Endings then, are they all new, or do you keep a stockpile of stuff to go back to?
Half of them were written 2 years ago when I was in Solo World, and then last year I was concentrating on Squeeze stuff and doing some new stuff for Squeeze, which we did, and the other half were written this year.
Because I was going to ask you about a particular song on there which you've played in session for us today, Kevin Dave.
Yeah,
story about 2 brothers who run a pub. I love the sort of mundane detail in there which colours in the picture. The fantastic line about the pub menu. Chinese, Italian, French and Thai, chicken curry, steak and kidney pie, all bases covered, no reason why. That observational thing, that way with words, obviously, like you say, there's a little bit of Chris's influence in there, but I would say you're quite a wry character anyway. Are you a people watcher?
Yeah, I love, sometimes those characters are real. And often it will take years for that to filter through. I'll be writing about something 5-6 years ago by the time I realise what it is. So, I enjoy that.
Do you sort of keep a journal of that stuff?
I sort of make notes about things and jot down phrases, or, if something's lucky enough to come to me as inspiration, which is very rare, I'll make a note of it. I always carry a notebook.
Well, to wrap up, as I say, the album's out shortly. Do you have a plan far ahead what might be next for you after that? Are you allowed to say what you told me?
absolutely. Yeah, we're Chris and I are doing songs for Danny Baker's series, which is going to be on ITV, I think, autumn. 6-hour-long episodes, 2 songs per episode.
That's a dramatisation of his
dramatisation of his autobiography, yeah. And it's a really exciting, funny, well put together project. I'm really excited by it because the other thing is it means that we'll have a fair crack at being heard, which is really hard for a band in our position otherwise.
Glenn, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thank you.
A Mexican standoff that neither would trade. Kev runs the pub with his brother Dave. Food on the menu from all over the place. Chinese, Italian, French and Thai. Chicken curry, steak and kidney pie. All bases covered, there's no reason why. From everything I own to life's a cabaret. They belt out karaoke on the corner stage. Kevin would sing, but it was mostly Dave. Dave is the brawn and Kev is the brains. Kev does the books while Dave clears the drains. Dave is the beauty and Kev is the beast. Kev has the hops while Dave has the yeast. Dave has ideas while Kev procrastinates. So Kevin lies down while Davey lifts the weight.